Mayor, we're ready to begin.
Okay. This meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is called to order. Madam Recorder, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker.
Here.
Councilors Koha.
Here.
O'Neill.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
Lamont.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
And Mans.
Here.
Okay, Ms. Simpson, do we have anybody who wants to provide citizen comment tonight?
We do. Justin Luber is joining the meeting, and you'll see him appear on your screen here shortly.
Okay.
Mr. Luber, thanks for joining the meeting. You can unmute your mic. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll have the timer ready for you. You may begin when you're ready.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hello, council members, and good afternoon. My name is Justin Luber, and my wife, Pasha Luber, and I live at 4160 Lakeview Boulevard. We have lived on the street for 10 years. The section of Lakeview Boulevard that I am referencing today is the quarter-mile segment that is between Bryant Road and South Shore Boulevard. I am requesting the council to please review this small segment for opportunities to improve safety, walkability, and aesthetics. The most important aspect is safety. First, this short section of Lakeview Boulevard, while being a main feeder street for commuting, is also heavily used by many residents as a recreational fitness route and has been increasing in usage over the years. It's wonderful to see the many white walkers and bikers of all ages, runners, dog walking, and even strollers, often in multiples where they are paired up together and not in single file. However, there is no sidewalk in this portion of Lakeview Boulevard, and the pathway shoulder area of the road fluctuates in width, where it becomes wider and narrower along the stretch that people often walk into the lane of traffic or on the white line itself. As you can appreciate, this has been impacted greatly by social distancing for COVID-19, with people walking in larger paths around each other and into the lanes of traffic in order to provide safe distancing from others. Installing a sidewalk would help provide a safer area to walk and run. Second, cars are rarely staying below the posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour and routinely go up to 40 to 45 miles per hour, racing up to the next intersection. Unfortunately, the excessive speeding has gotten worse over the years and not better. Some solutions could include a speed indicator signage, installing a speed table or speed cushion typically used specifically for feeder roads, or other methods of addressing this behavior is requested to assist. And third, the homeowners along this stretch have an even tougher time exiting the residential driveways with traffic going faster than the posted limit. As it relates to aesthetics, we would like to request if a review can be done with the vegetation that is along the side of that stretch of road. Some areas are needing maintenance. We would like to request if there could be trimming back of any shrubs, blackberry vines, and various low-hanging tree branches to address pathway and visibility clearance. In summary, this small stretch of Lakeview Boulevard sometimes feels forgotten, but it has so much opportunity to be an exceptional section for residents walking to the Lake Grove Swim Park, walking to the local restaurants on the corner, or going out for an afternoon stroll with their family. Thank you for your time and review, and thank you to the City Council and staff for all of your contributions to our wonderful city.
Mr. Luber, thank you very much. I'm certain that that's somewhere on our CIP. We'll look at further and see what we can do.
So I'll refer the traffic issues to engineering and the vegetation management to probably code enforcement, because the vegetation management is usually the responsibility of the property owner.
Excellent, great. Thank you so much. Have one.
The railroad.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is a proclamation. Are we ready for that?
Yes, I'm clicking as fast as I can. Here we go. Okay. Mayor Sue Scobert, our communications manager, and Dale Jorgensen, our police chief, have joined the meeting.
Welcome to both of you.
Oh.
Sue, you need to unmute yourself.
That would help. Mayor and
Yes, thank-
councilors, I am here to let you know of the great work done by our dispatchers. Across the nation, during times of personal crisis and community disaster, we call 911 for police, fire, and medical help. This single number is staffed by trained dispatchers who handle calls, often mitigating circumstances that keep our officers, medics, and fire personnel safer. As an example, one of our dispatchers spent over an hour on the phone with an armed suicidal subject building a rapport. Although a crisis negotiator responded to LOCOM to assist, they did not have to take over the call because the dispatcher had gained the individual's trust, leading to a positive outcome for all. Because of this type of work, LOCOM staff and our 4 user agencies recommend approval of the proclamation to recognize the work LOCOM dispatchers do and to honor and celebrate their contributions to public safety.
Mr. Jorgensen, anything from you want to say?
No, I think Sue has said it all, and we truly have a crown jewel in LOCOM, and I wholeheartedly support the proclamation.
Well, let me read the proclamation. It is proclaimed now that from this day forward, Lake Oswego Communications, which is called LOCOM, emergency telecommunicators, are hereby elevated to the status of first responders. LOCOM 911 emergency telecommunicators will join 911 telecommunicators who work at Clackamas Communications in this designation, ensuring all emergency telecommunications within Clackamas County are equally recognized. And thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a few items of business here. The first being item 5.1, which is regarding an ordinance 2853. And Ms. Davis will be presenting on this.
Thank you, Mayor. So the time set for a public hearing on ordinance 2853, an ordinance of the Lake Oswego City Council, yes, ordinance 2853, an ordinance of the Lake Oswego City Council amending LOC Chapter 50, the Community Development Code, for the purpose of clarifying and updating various provisions and adopting findings. This is case number LU 20-005. This is a legislative decision, so it's generally a policy decision within the discretion of the City Council. And although it may be discretionary, it must also comply with any applicable state law, as well as any applicable statewide planning goal or administrative rule adopted pursuant to ORS Chapter 197. And legislative amendment to the Zoning Code, Development Code, or Development Standards must also comply with any applicable provision of the Lake Oswego Comprehensive Plan. And the public hearing process will begin with a presentation by staff. Testimony will then be received by the public. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. The time limits will not include time taken up by questions from the council or responses to such questions, and any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case will any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Since this is not quasi-judicial, I will not be asking about ex parte contacts or bias, but I would ask at this point if any city councilor wishes to make a declaration related to conflicts of interest. And hearing no declarations, we will be ready for the staff report.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Ellen Davis, Associate Planner here at the City, and I will give a very brief overview of this year's annual Community Development Code amendments. The proposed amendments are broken into 2 categories, 17 maintenance items and 4 policy items. The maintenance items are generally straightforward code cleanups, such as deleting requirements and procedures that no longer exist, clarifying definitions, and cleaning up process requirements. For instance, the requirement for a pre-application conference for any in-stream work in a sensitive lands area. These maintenance items don't represent any major changes in policy, so I won't go into too much detail or any detail about those maintenance amendment items, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions at the end. The only maintenance item that I do want to be sure to clarify is number 6, which is located on page 7 of attachment 2, which is the proposed code text. We sent out a Measure 56 notice about this item to all potentially affected property owners, and I received a few questions from the public, a little bit of confusion about it. So I just want to take a minute to explain, make sure that's clear. Basically, we already have in the Sensitive Lands Code a provision that properties with a protected wetland or stream, under certain circumstances, can reduce the area around the stream or wetland that is protected in one area and then expand the protection area in another, as long as the average buffer or the average area that is protected meets the requirement for that resource. Currently, the code specifically lists the ability to use that buffer averaging for 25-foot and 30-foot buffers, but it does not mention the 50-foot buffers, which we do have some resources that do have a 50-foot buffer required. So we're adding that 50-foot standard in there so that that flexibility to, in some cases, average a buffer width can apply to 50-foot buffers as well as 25 and 30. So if there are any other questions about the other maintenance items, I'll answer those at the end. But I'm going to focus on the policy items, which are more involved and have could have more impacts than the maintenance items, which shouldn't have any real impacts. Policy item number 1 is a proposal to require that driveways be located within a property's frontage as bounded by an extension of the side property lines. So this would prevent driveways from extending in front of the neighbor's property. And this proposal is intended to clarify owner responsibility, especially for maintenance, stormwater management, and protection of the clear site area around each driveway approach. We have seen a few cases of conflict where a property owner tries to extend their driveway in front of another property. There can be some disagreement or misunderstanding about who's responsible for that area, making sure the vegetation is cleared away to make sure it's safe that you can see oncoming traffic. So this would just be a proposed policy item to clean that up and require driveways to be located in front of the property that they serve instead of extending in front of the neighboring properties. Policy item number 2 would bring the R6 zone lot coverage methodology in line with all of the other residential zones. So the R6 zone is located only in the First Edition neighborhood. It's not located anywhere else in the city, just in First Edition neighborhood. And currently, it is the one zone that has a different method to establish the maximum allowable lot coverage. It's different than any other zone. All of our other residential zones match and just use the standard methodology in our definition section of our code. And that standard definition is that generally if a house is tall, it is limited to a smaller footprint. And if a house is short, it can spread out more and cover more of the property. There's a sliding scale for the maximum lot coverage based on the structure's height. And the way that all of the other zones measure that height for lot coverage purposes is by looking all around the house and measuring from the ground to the roof above the house, all around it from the existing grade, or if they're cutting away from the hillside, then measuring from that area at the lowest point of the cut, measuring to the roof point above it. Wherever is the tallest part of the house, that's the measurement used for lot coverage for determining what the height is of the structure and how much of the lot they can cover up. In the R6 zone, however, the height measurement for determining lot coverage is measured from the highest existing slope within the building's footprint, regardless of how the lot will be graded for construction. At very most, this can yield up to 6% more of the lot covered than would be allowed in any of the other zones. Typically, it'd be more of a 1 to 4%, but at the very most, it could be 6%, just through that being able to take the highest point in the building footprint instead of measuring around what will actually be the result once the grading for the construction is done. The R6 zone also has different exceptions to lot coverage than the other zones in the city. So all the other zones have any structure that's taller than 30 inches above ground would count towards lot coverage, except for 2 feet of eaves and trellises that are at least 25% open. In the R6 zone, however, there is a duplication of some of the listed exceptions, but also an addition that decks up to 5 feet tall don't count towards lot coverage, and also that stairs never count towards lot coverage, even when they exceed 30 inches tall. So it's different than any other zone. And so we are proposing to change the height methodology and the exceptions for lot coverage to match all of the other residential zones, which would make the code easier to use and understand for developers, residents, and staff, instead of having to learn a separate lot coverage methodology and set of exceptions for just one zone. It's different from everywhere else. And although this is a relatively small change that in most cases would probably yield only about a 2% reduction in allowed lot coverage on average, it is a small step towards leaving a little more room for the existing trees and planting new mitigation trees in First Edition neighborhood. The same standard lot coverage methodology and standard exceptions work just fine in all of our other zones, including the R5 zone, which has a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. It's a similar size to the 6,000 square foot minimum in the R6 zone. All of the current building design standards, such as setback planes, minimum roof pitch, would continue to apply, and this would just be a relatively small change to bring the maximum lot coverage in line with all of the other zones. The First Edition Forest Hills Neighborhood Association supports this proposed amendment, and the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland has submitted written testimony in opposition to this amendment, which you have received as Exhibit G1. The third policy item proposes to define co-housing and add the definition of co-housing to the definition of multifamily dwelling. This would increase the flexibility for multifamily developments to share facilities internally. So the project that brought this to our attention was proposing a large shared kitchen and having units that only had very small kitchenettes. So in that case, they wanted to share a large kitchen and have just smaller units that all shared that facility internally. This proposal would not alter any density or design standards for multifamily housing. It would not change the required land use review process. It would only allow multifamily development within a zone that already allows it after going through the full development review process required for multifamily developments to share facilities within their community. So it's only going to change the internal workings of multifamily developments. It's not going to change how it looks from the outside, what process it has to go through, where it's allowed, how big it's allowed to be, how many people are allowed to live there, how many parking spaces they need. All of that's going to be the same. So it's mostly changing the internal, how many facilities or what facilities can be shared internally. Exhibit F1 is a publication from the American Planning Association on inclusive zoning, and this explains a little bit more about why additional flexibility in living arrangements like co-housing are becoming more and more important as demographics change, populations age. Having this flexibility to share facilities it doesn't have to take place. Nowhere is going to be required to have co-housing, but can just provide more flexibility for other living situations that might become more predominant in the future. The proposal would not affect any single family zones in the city. It only allows co-housing as a multifamily use, so that is subject to all of the restrictions on location, size, density, and design that currently apply to multifamily development. It is not a single family use. It would not be allowed in any single family zones. It's just a question of allowing those units to share facilities internally. Currently, the definition of dwelling unit requires each unit to provide a full living, cooking, and sanitary facilities to be a dwelling unit. So this would be allowing kitchens, for instance, to be shared. And this item is not related and has no relation to House Bill 2001. So if we do want to look at that in the future as part of House Bill 2001, that will be part of that future conversation. This is completely separate. Policy item number 4 would combine the definitions of community institution, institutional use. These two terms currently have a great deal of overlap and can cause confusion. The proposed change seeks to retain all of the potential uses that are currently listed, but it streamlines those definitions into one single term, which is institutional use. And this term does not include public facilities, which are defined separately. So this would just be taking two overlapping terms and combining them into one, trying not to lose any potential uses. We're trying not to prohibit anything that's currently allowed. The Planning Commission recommended approval of all of the amendments, both maintenance and policy. And I will go ahead and end my presentation here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Councilor Mann?
Yes, I have a couple of quick questions. Thank you so much, Ms. Davis. That was a very succinct presentation. First question I have is, do we know how many lots are zoned R6 in first edition? Do we have an idea?
Let me quickly share my screen, and this will give you a bit of an. So the R6 zone is really the heart of first edition. It's bounded by 10th Street on the west side, A Avenue on the south. It kind of zigzags through the heart of first edition, and then it goes up G Avenue along the top. So I mean, I haven't counted all of the lots, but this might give you a little bit of a visual representation.
Okay. Thank you for that. So in other words, it is most of first edition, the core of first edition.
That's correct.
The second question I have, segging into something entirely different, is I believe a ministerial or administrative change on flag lot access lane consolidation, which is on page 10, item 9. And it looks like we're deleting whenever practical from, or striking whenever practical from the text. Will this change anything about the access for flag lots?
No. So the reason that we are proposing to remove wherever practicable is that there's a requirement from the state that we have clear and objective standards that apply to any housing.
Okay.
So in this case, as you read the standard right now, it says this wherever practicable, which isn't a very clear and objective term. It's a bit subjective. So we're proposing deleting that from the first sentence. So your clear and objective standard is to consolidate your access. And then the second sentence provides a discretionary review track, which we're allowed to do. So you need to have one. If you do this clear and objective thing, we will approve you. Or if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then you can go through a discretionary review where we can look at whether or not it is practicable for the new lots to have individual access points, or whether or not it's practicable to combine those. So no, we will generally be encouraging consolidation into a shared single access lane. But then in those cases where it's not possible, we'll look at what's going on with that property and be able to do a subjective review.
Perfect. And I apologize for the misreading of practicable. Calling it practical. Small difference there. Thank you.
Questions from anybody else? Councilor Waterman?
So just, I mean, on the R6, because that's a pretty big chunk of first edition, is there a reason why you wouldn't change the other zoning to match R6? I mean, is R6 just archaic? Was it like, and why is it the kind of the child that is different than the other ones?
The R6 zone was created at a different time than all of the other zones through as part of the neighborhood planning process. And I do believe that a member of the neighborhood association board will be joining us, and I think that she is a little more familiar with that process at that time. It was a little bit before my time, but the R6 zone was created after most of the other zones and separately, and it went through a more specific process trying to look at infill and keeping new development in scale with the existing development and pattern of the R6 zone. So it's a little bit different than all the other zones. And again, this isn't going to be a huge change, but it would just be making it more similar to all of the other zones, making it a little bit easier for us, for the development community, for residents to handle our code and figure out what's going on instead of having a different method in one place than another, especially when we're talking about just a few percentage points in lot coverage.
So you don't think that overall, if a house was built under this change, would differ that much from the existing houses that have gone up in the last, say, 10 years of redevelopment?
The most that it would change would be 6%, and that'd be pretty rare. That 6% is based on very specific heights that the new development would be, and only a handful of lots in first edition have that much of a slope to them. A lot of first edition has kind of a more gentle slope, so you'd be looking more at maybe a 2-foot grade change within the building footprint. It's pretty rare that you would have at least a 4-foot change within a building footprint. So there are some lots that might lose a little bit, maybe up to 6%, but that is the most that they would be losing from this change.
Okay, and when you say 6% of the volume of the house, not necessarily square footage.
6% of the lot coverage, which you can think of as the footprint if you look at the house from above. So not the floor area. If you add up the gross floor area on all of the levels, it would be consolidating it if you just looked at it from above, how much of the lot is taken up by the house.
Right, but you also said that there was restrictions from a vertical standpoint as well to do the total.
So the maximum height, the maximum floor area, all of those other standards are staying the same. So you could still build a house that was 28 feet tall or up to 32 feet tall, depending on the slope of your lot. So we're not changing the maximum height, but we have a sliding scale for lot coverage in all of our zones, even in the R6 right now, where there is an incentive to keep your house short if you want to cover more of the property, or if you do just want to embrace the tall house, then you're limited to how much of the lot you can cover. So you can kind of go either way and try to maximize your development potential either way.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Davis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Recorder, do we have anybody who wants to testify on this matter?
Yes, Mayor, you do have 2 people that would like to speak. The
Okay.
first is joining the meeting now, Roseanne Johnson with the Home Builders Association. She'll be
All right.
joining here shortly. Hi, Roseanne, you have 5 minutes to talk, and I'm going to go ahead and set the timer. You can start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Simpson. Good afternoon, Lake Oswego City Councilors, Mayor Studebaker. My name is Roseanne Johnson. I cover government affairs for Lake Oswego and other cities in the county for the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland. I am bringing you should have received some written testimony from our department on agenda item 5.1, your policy item 2 in this ordinance, which is the R6 maximum lot coverage standard. So first of all, let me start out by saying that for those not familiar, the HBA for Metropolitan Portland represents over 800, close to 850 companies and thousands of men and women working in the remodeling and residential construction industry. And we also have a huge component of promoting and advocating for housing affordability and choice for all who reside in our region. So your city's R6 zone supports the construction of new and relatively attainable housing throughout your city, specifically as you've seen in that first edition Forest Hills neighborhood. And my understanding is that in 1996, when the zone was adopted, the purpose was to allow for lots that more similarly were more compatible with existing development in the area. So it went from an R7.5 zone to an R6 zone because a lot of the lots were already 6,000 square feet. And so it was, it brought down the minimum lot size. And then the allowed building footprint or lot coverage and the exemptions to certain structures to allow for articulation on those structures that were now on smaller minimum lot sizes were created for that specific zone for that reason, to allow for slightly bigger footprint, to allow for a little bit more articulation, whereas in bigger minimum lot size zones, you don't, that those exemptions and the way that height was measured was not necessary for those zones. So that's my understanding. And then last year we had the passage of House Bill 2001 at the state level, which legalized additional housing options such as townhomes, duplexes in single family zoned areas. And as you all know, as that's being worked through rulemaking at the state level, we're really looking forward to what opportunities that can provide all cities for relatively more affordable housing. So not capital A with a subsidy, affordable housing, but relatively more choices for different types of housing. And that includes in the R6 zone. So doesn't get rid of single family zoning. Still, you know, your builders and developers will still build single family homes there. No single family homes are probably going to be torn down if they're worth more than the land that they're on. But in the case that they aren't, redevelopment can occur in those areas, which is good for the city's tax base. So again, the zone can allow for these duplexes and these townhomes, perhaps other middle housing types, which is so critical to accommodating new families and first-time home buyers, move-up home buyers, even from renters in your city. So given those needs, HBA feels that Lake Oswego should avoid undermining housing affordability, especially in this zone that has the best chance for redevelopment. But this proposed policy item 2 would do the opposite. It would restrict the the permitted building footprint in that zone. And then, as you heard, it would reduce the footprint, but also the square footage. And then that's like maybe a bedroom or an office, right? Up to 6% of a building footprint could be, let's say it's 1,500 square feet of a footprint. That could be, you know, maybe a 10 by 10 bedroom or a 9 by 10 bedroom or an office space, den, something that we all desperately need now during school from home and work from home. So, and then also in addition, by changing some of the exempted structures from previously being exempted and providing articulation on these homes on smaller lots, make them more aesthetically pleasing. Now those are going away. So for example, some stairs that might be above 30 inches but be below 5 feet, or a balcony or a faux balcony, those would be counted towards your lot coverage now, and therefore reduce the building footprint and the square footage ultimately yet again. So kind of exacerbating each other, two different sub policies within this one policy would be exacerbating each other, causing for smaller homes, less attainable homes, and actually even threatening to not even bring middle housing like townhomes or duplexes to market there. So with that in mind, I know that this desire by the neighborhood association and the city to save trees is very applaudable, and we don't disagree with saving trees as an association. However, we just want more time to spend and work with the neighborhood association on the potential unintended consequences of the proposal. So lack of articulation, more boxy structures.
Ms. Johnson, your time is up.
Thank you so much, Ms. Simpson. And I will cede the floor.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to see if we have questions for you.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Johnson? I have one question. Although the footprint might be a little bit smaller, couldn't you make that up in the design of the house so you'd have the same kind of total square footage in the house?
So when you shrink the building footprint, you're basically taking square footage from the top, and then you'd have to you'd have to cantilever the top, but because that's still considered your building footprint because it's measured from my understanding is it's measured from a downward view on, from your roof down, or from your extended balconies downward. So anything that basically would preclude light or water from getting through is considered your building footprint. So I hope I'm answering your question. You can't simply, squeeze the bottom and then expand the top.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Koha.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the one factor that could be affected would be what we would say the bedroom on the main, and that's a favorite of the developer. Am I correct?
What I would say, Councilor Kohlhoff, is that, those are just examples of living space, functional living space that would need to be traded out. So essentially it would be eliminated. You'd be eliminating a bedroom or an office space or a study, den, schoolroom, what have you, in lieu of, or, to make up for the lost building footprint and ultimately square footage of the home.
But you've described what the potential in first edition, you've described it as greater access or opportunity for affordable housing, but that isn't what's being built in first edition.
Right, and so that's where I like to differentiate between affordable with a capital A. So some things that would be meeting the definition that that Clackamas County has set out. You already have exemptions for, I think it's 20 or more units built to that standard, that capital A affordable standard. You don't, charge the SDCs, I believe, nor the demo tax. So that's totally separate from what I say when I talk about housing affordability. So housing affordability is more relative for your community. So like Oswego, yes, it has very high land values just inherently because of the nature of the city, its location, you have the lake, you have so many amenities, highly resourced area. And this is what we're talking about with housing affordability from a relative standpoint, is that maybe, a buyer coming from another community nearby that has been wanting to get into Lake Oswego or wanting to be, contributing to the schools there and have their children go to school in Lake Oswego. I mean, it's a very, let's face it, it's a very desirable area to live. We all know this, highly resourced, as I said. And so to allow for townhome development, once House Bill 2001 is implemented at the local level, or duplexes there that look exactly the same as a single family home, you would never know, except that you see two doors there. They're built to the same quality construction standards, the same amenities, the same finishes. This is what I'm talking about when you have two homes that are, say, 1,700 square feet side by side, or maybe they're on a corner lot, one faces one direction, one faces the other. Be simple townhome home ownership opportunities or a duplex, but appearing aesthetically as a single family home is achieving the aim of relative housing affordability.
Councilor Mann.
Yes, we've heard from Ms. Davis that the maximum loss, if you will, would be 6% in rare occasions where there might be a slope. And perhaps on average, if I'm paraphrasing you wrong, Ms. Davis, let me know, 2%. So if we're talking duplexes on a 6,000 square foot lot with all the setbacks and so on and so forth, how many square feet are we actually losing with that 2% in reality?
Oh, is that question directed for me or for Ms. Davis?
Sorry.
30 square feet, Jackie.
30 square feet?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. 30 square feet, which would be...
Take 6,000 times 25%, that's about the lot coverage you get on a 6,000. Then 6% of that would be 90 square feet, 2% of that. There you go.
Got it, 30 square feet, thank you. 30 square feet in real terms, either Councilor O'Neill or Ms. Johnson, would be approximately what? A closet size in an average home, not in a not in a tiny home, but in an average home, what would that work out to for someone like me who couldn't calculate that to begin with and is a lay person, not a builder, not a home builders association person? What is 30 square feet equal? Anyone?
50 square feet is kind of a kid's bathroom. So you'd have tub, toilet, single sink,
Okay.
5 by 10.
Does that sound right to you, Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for drawing a visual picture for me. Appreciate it.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Johnson. We appreciate your input.
Mayor, next you have Carol Ockert, who is joining the meeting. And Ms. Ockert, you can turn on your microphone and start. You'll have 5 minutes when you're ready to go.
I actually need to share screen. Is that something that you can set up for me on your end?
You should be able to do that where you are
On my end?
right now.
Okay. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, have I succeeded? Yeah?
Yep.
Thank you, Carol. Now
All
you-
right, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Ockert, and I'm the Land Use Liaison for Fan Forest Hills, and it's nice to see you all. I'm speaking today on 2 items under the Policy Code Amendments. First, Item 2, the update to code in first edition, and it will refine the R6 code to better support best practices. This code change was suggested almost a year ago by a prominent designer of homes in R6 during a city meeting attended by the Fan Forest Hills chair, our vice chair, another member of the building community, myself, and staff. The home designer brought to our attention that building height in Fan was measured differently than any other zone in the city, and he suggested this code be changed to conform with the rest of the city. This update will simplify the code and could also have the added benefit of reducing the number of tree appeals, something we all want to see happen. Another side benefit from this code adjustment may be slightly decreasing impermeable surfaces, resulting in improved drainage, again, something Fan struggles with because of our limited stormwater system. Because this change was suggested by a designer of many of the quality homes in the R6 zone, we have confidence that if there are any design modifications that result from the code refinement, they will be an asset. This R6 code adjustment will streamline code, make it consistent for staff, and make code more clear and concise. Moving on to Item 3, a code change that would permit co-housing, something currently not allowed by our Lake Oswego City Code. Staff provided this picture of a co-housing project in Southeast Portland and tells us this proposed code would allow co-housing to be built only in multifamily zones. But the example they choose does not look like anything I have seen built in Lake Oswego in a multifamily zone. The area and design in the photo looks way more single-family residential. In HB 2003, there is a discussion of strategies that cities can use to achieve compliance with the wave of change that the legislature has directed. I have pulled a direct quote from the HB 2003 draft. Allow for single-use occupancy, adult dorms, and co-housing in all residential zones. But this is only one possibility among many options that cities can use to achieve compliance with new housing goals. Cities can choose many other routes to compliance. And to be clear, HB 2001 does not require co-housing. It does not even mention co-housing. Neighborhood associations in Lake Oswego became concerned when they saw this new co-housing concept appear in annual code updates. So much so that a number of them consulted with their boards. Here are letters that were submitted to Planning Commission during their work session. Our request was and is defer co-housing consideration to the HB 2001 process. After seeing the overwhelming negative response from these neighborhoods, Planning Commission actually said we must be confused about co-housing and code and completely disregarded us. We are not confused. In March, staff held a pre-app for a co-housing development in our downtown. The vice chair of Fan Forest Hills and I listened and then made it clear that co-housing cannot be built under our current code. Staff said co-housing was permitted and that the developer could continue with the project. I followed up with a detailed written list on code non-compliance. Staff followed up in writing saying they believe there is a basis for considering co-housing similar enough to multifamily that they recommended the applicant pursue it at DRC under our current code. Then, after silence, co-housing shows up in annual code updates. So who is confused? We believe that co-housing does not belong in annual code updates. Staff heard neighborhoods and offered to do a bigger process. Planning Commission said no. They directed staff to move co-housing on the fast track forward. So here we are. I am carrying these many neighborhood association voices forward. Please understand that you could be listening this afternoon to 70 minutes of consistent one after the other neighborhood association testimony. But on election day, out of consideration for your time, it seemed best that I carry this message forward. So I ask that you hear my testimony today and multiply the message impact by 7 active neighborhoods. Now to our code. Lake Oswego does not have substandard code. We currently require a kitchen and a bathroom in each dwelling unit. I compared our code to West Lynn. Then I called and talked with their planning department. West Lynn confirmed that their code does not permit co-housing and expressed disbelief at what Lake Oswego was looking to do. I reached out and had a 45-minute call with Ethan Stuckmeyer, the senior planner for housing programs at DLCD, tasked with overseeing HB 2001 and HB 2003. He made it clear that how a dwelling unit is defined is not part of HB 2001. He confirmed that the definition of dwelling unit is up to the individual city. So, prior to adoption of HB 2001 compliant code, you on council are being asked not by DLCD, but by our planning commission to blindly open a door to Lake Oswego code. These proposed definition changes alter the basic building blocks of Lake Oswego code. What is more foundational to planning with a capital P than the definition of dwelling unit? If you want to allow co-housing, it makes so much more sense to examine the fit as part of the bigger code rewrite. In simple language, the proposed co-housing code allows for all kitchens and bathrooms in a development to be communal instead of one kitchen and bathroom per dwelling unit. This code is substandard. It doesn't even say how many toilets would need to be provided for a proposed number of dwelling units in a project. Is it 1 toilet per 2 dwelling units? 1 toilet per 10 dwelling units? Where do I stop? Well, the city of Portland has an answer. Skip to the words in red. It says 1 toilet, 1 lavatory, and 1 shower, each provided at the rate of 1 for every 12 residents. Wow. Do we want that in Lake Oswego? Yes, someone can say we don't count how many toilets are in a single family residence or how many people live in a house, but that is beside the point. For good reason, code treats multifamily differently, specifying many more components. And currently for multifamily, code says there has to be a toilet in each dwelling unit, period. I grew up in government housing for poor people. The dwelling unit may have had bare floors and no heat, but at least it had a toilet. I don't want to see Lake Oswego adopt code that promotes substandard workforce housing, substandard affordable housing, or substandard co-housing. We can do better. It seems very clear to me that one toilet for 12 people is a low bar standard. Who wants to be standing in line with potentially 10 people in front of you while you wait to use the toilet or shower? But Portland code is actually better than our suggested code. In the proposed LO code, I don't read any limit on how many dwelling units can be served by one toilet or shower. Do you? This code is so poorly formed. What you have learned today must surely make you pause. And that is what 7 neighborhood associations are asking you to do. So to wrap up, first, R6 code adjustment is well written. Staff has provided small, simple adjustments to improve the code. That is the purpose of annual code updates. And I ask on behalf of the Fan Forest Hills Neighborhood Association that you adopt it. Second, with regard to co-housing, please hear the combined voices of 7 neighborhood associations. Remove all the proposed co-housing code changes. Item 3, from annual code updates. Thank you for your time on Election Day, Civics Day. Appreciate it.
Questions, anybody? I don't, Council Wendland.
Could you take the presentation? Thanks. I guess this would be directed to staff. How did the co-housing subject come up? And why is it included in here? What was the origin of it?
Ms. Okert is correct that there was a proposal for a co-housing development in the first edition neighborhood association in a portion of the zone that is actually zoned for multifamily, so not the R6. And that proposal did show a shared kitchen facility, kind of minimal kitchenette, hot plate situations in the units themselves, but a large shared kitchen facility with the idea that most people would share that on a daily basis. So we as staff did review that proposal, and we at the time did find that it was substantially similar to multifamily. Again, it would meet all of the density requirements, it would go through the same process, it would meet the same dimensional and design standards. So we weren't looking at it as a different use. It would have the same number of units allowed within it. We were just saying that, oh, like if they're just sharing a kitchen, then that's not a different land use from a land use 10,000 view. That's more internal and internal workings of how their kitchen schedule and chore chart works within the development. So we did originally say that that was in substantial compliance with multifamily housing. It was allowed within the zone. We did listen to the feedback from the neighborhood association that they did not find that it was substantially similar to existing multifamily. And so that's why we did put it on the annual code amendments to look at it as a potential change, that if it's not substantially similar to multifamily already, then maybe we should look at it as a separate item, look at it in with the rest of the annual code amendments and try to decide if that's something that would be appropriate for this community. So that is where it came from, was a development, as Ms. Okert mentioned.
Okay, and so the co-housing is only in multifamily dwellings?
Yes.
That's correct. And if 2001 did come through and somebody wanted to put a fourplex on a lot anywhere in Lake Oswego, would the co-housing standards then apply?
If a multifamily proposal was allowed by that new House Bill 2001, which again, we don't know what that's going to look like at this time, if multifamily is allowed on a property, then it could be multifamily co-housing or multifamily not co-housing. So they could share a kitchen or not share a kitchen.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councilor Koha.
So I'm not at all offended about everybody being in the kitchen, as long as they clean up after themselves. That sounds good to me. But I was a little concerned. Can you take a step back and explain what the bathroom situation was? Are there going to be limitations, or what are we? It talked me through that a little bit.
We don't currently have any limitations on number of toilets or bathrooms in our code. I'm not sure if the building department or health department has a requirement for that. That's not a a planning requirement that we looked at.
I think I meant the other way around. I mean, how many are you looking at, or is there such a thing as as Ms. Okert said, 12 people? Would we say it's okay for 12 people with one bathroom, with the idea that you could have a big family and have one bathroom? And clearly people my age grew up where there was only one bathroom. But what if anything is in the code to say what that relationship would be?
Mr. Siegel.
Councilor Koloff, number of washrooms that are required and the number of occupants per washroom are regulated under the building code. That controls, and that's for sanitary reasons, among others, of course.
Well, then the question, Mr. Siegel, I think is, in a co-housing, you've got to have one toilet per unit, correct?
In co-housing, Ms. Davis, what does the language say about definition of dwelling unit for co-housing relative to sanitary?
So we're not specifying sanitary facilities or number of sanitary facilities. So that is something that could be shared. You could have a large dormitory style bathroom. We're not specifying a certain number of sanitary facilities per unit or specifying how that's located or distributed within the development.
But you've got to have a minimum of something, don't you?
You have to have a minimum of at least one for it to be a dwelling unit to be permitted under the residential code.
But you don't have a minimum ratio of number of toilets relative to the number of residents. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my point, Mayor, was that the building code does specify, and we could follow up with some more information on that if you were to continue this item. The building code does specify a ratio of I was just looking at basically fixtures, per occupants in larger residence uses.
Can I answer your question, Councilor Koloff?
I think I'm tracking.
Okay. Other questions, Councilor Mans?
Yes, I'm intrigued by the idea. However, I am in concurrence with Ms. Okart's thinking around including this in HB 2001. I appreciate the forward thinking of looking at a communal kitchen, if you will, in co-housing. I see inherent problems in that from an interpersonal standpoint, but be it as that is, it's not a planning standpoint. I think from a cleanliness as far as putting the code together and what will happen with HB 2001, my personal feeling is to look at it at that point in time, if that is possible. Did we approve or disapprove the project that asked for this communal kitchen concept in co-housing? Or is that on hold?
It's currently on hold.
Thank you for that answer.
Councilor Wynn.
Yeah, so with this co-housing, does it address the issue about parking? I know that with that many people living all together in a smaller confined space, does it address how many parking spaces are required? Because I think about people that maybe, if we're looking at this potentially as workforce housing, or people that are all working, I doubt that people would be stay-at-home type of people living in a co-housing arrangement. So parking and cars and such would be something I want to hear about.
Yes, the parking standards would not change for co-housing versus a standard multifamily housing development. So the same requirements, which in a residential use would be 0.5 space per dwelling unit. So You would still have, and there are also some other standards around the number of bedrooms. For a studio or efficiency, which these could be qualified as, would be 1 space required per unit, regardless of whether it was co-housing or a traditional multifamily with a kitchen or bathroom or whatever in each unit. So the parking standards would not change.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Mott?
This co-housing concept has been tried over in Europe and is slowly getting into America. And the ones that I've found that are working are like a series of townhomes. They have their own bathrooms, they have their own kitchen, but they have a communal house, like a clubhouse, where they can all get together and socialize. It's a great concept for senior parents, single parents or seniors, because they have a social life, shared tools, shared meals, but they all have their individual bathrooms and kitchens. So I think this is so complex a concept that we should defer this part of the change to the code for the council to get a better handle on what this means. The APA flyer that we got was one part of it. There's other research that's out there that would help everybody understand how this works, and including a little test case if this person presented it, how it would work. But if it's shared bathrooms and shared kitchen, that's a dorm or a boarding house. So I think we have to be careful here and just pull it out of this, approve the rest of it, and then ask the planning commission and planning department to bring back some information that get us all up to speed.
Okay, Ms. Simpson, is there anybody else that wants to testify on this matter?
No, Mayor.
Okay, so let's say that the hearing is closed, and I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 2853, and with the exception that we pull out the item regarding co-housing and ask staff to consider that further.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion, please. Yes, Council Wendland.
So on the R6, I just have a question on how, when it says it may reduce the number of tree appeals, if you're only getting 2 to 6% difference on a lot, how's this really going to change the tree situation? I mean, how does that, they mentioned trees. I mean, I think, I look at this as just really conforming this into making sure that we're the same as R5, R7.5 and whatever, so that we're consistent. Is there really a tree advantage? I mean, other than the 2 to 6% lot coverage?
Well, that small lot coverage could leave a little bit more area around an existing tree, or also one struggle in this neighborhood with such relatively small lots and relatively large building footprints is a lot of applicants struggle to find good places to put mitigation trees or large stature mitigation trees because there's just so little pervious area left on the site. It would be a very small drop in the bucket. We're looking at this more as hopefully a low-hanging fruit rather than a solution to the tree canopy.
Okay, so I mean, the main thing is to kind of bring this in conformance with R5, R7.5, and so on.
This couple was on a camping trip when their windshield got a chip. They drove to.
That wasn't me.
Council, when did you have a?
That was not me speaking.
All right, we've got a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Madam Simpson, would you please call the roll?
Sure. So just to restate the motion, Mayor, you're moving to enact an ordinance with the exception of the co-housing piece. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mayor Studebaker?
Yes.
Councillor Kohlhoff?
Yes.
O'Neill?
Yes.
Nguyen?
Yes.
Lamont?
Yes.
Wendland?
Yes.
And Mans?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Ms. Davis, thank you for your help.
I note for the record, this is a tentative decision of the City Council, which will become final upon adoptions of the final version of the ordinance with findings and conclusions on November 17th, 2020.
Now we're into item 5.2, and I guess, Mr. Boone, you're going to be presenting for us. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Boone will be presenting. This is ordinance public, or not a public, yes, it is a public hearing, excuse me, on ordinance 2854, an ordinance of the Lake Oswego City Council clarifying, revising, and updating LOC 42.03.130 intersection site distance LOC 4509.065, abatement of dangerous building code, LOC 5502.082, tree cutting permit issuance, LOC 5502.92, tree cutting permit expiration, repealing Article 1255, compensation claims under ORS Chapter 197, and adding LOC 3402.065, helicopter landing or takeoff. This is not well, the public hearing process to begin with will begin with a presentation by staff. Then testimony will then be received by the public. A time limit of 3 minutes per person for testimony will be observed for all persons who testify. Of course, the council can alter that in its discretion. At this point, it's not a land use hearing, and it also is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so I'll not be asking about ex parte contacts or bias, but I would ask if any councilor wishes to make a declaration related to conflicts of interest. And hearing no declarations, we'd be ready for the staff report, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Powell. I think Mr. Powell has summarized the measure before us by reading the title. We have 6 items in our annual code update. One, which I shouldn't forget, is, because it's not listed in the text amendments, is repealing Article 1255, and that was the predecessor to Measure 49, and how you would submit claims for just compensation. Back then, that measure did not provide for procedures, and that's why we adopted 1255. It only relates to compensations under ORS Chapter 197. That's been repealed because Measure 49 is in Chapter 195. So it's not applicable anyway, so it's just surplus in the code at this point. The other matters, and there's 2 of them that I'll talk about. I'll mention. If anybody has any questions, there's the helicopter landing and takeoff. As indicated, we did have an inquiry about whether helicopter landings and takeoff could be permitted from private residences in Lake Oswego. While we don't govern the airspace, that's FAA, we can control where they land, and it's not an airport. So this measure is to require city manager approval, except in cases of an emergency or with the approval of the city manager. So, then the other matter I'll just mention is we're specifying the addition date of the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Building, because we need to, because it's a private entity that promotes that, promulgates those, we need to specify which edition we're doing. And that's the last edition. Also, it designates the city manager as being the hearing body, the appeal body, rather than the Building Appeals Commission, because we don't have that anymore. So it makes those 2 changes. Then there are some 2 changes in the site distance requirements. Will Farley, I think, is available to answer questions. And then Jessica Namanaloo is here to talk about the tree code revisions due to issuance and expiration of permits. And I'll let her, because I know she has a few words on that.
Try that again. Good afternoon, Council. Jessica Numanulu, Planning Manager. Briefly, the proposed tree code amendments that's part of this package are policy neutral amendments. And what they're designed to do is to codify current practice regarding the timing of the issuance of the notice of tentative decision for type 2 tree cutting applications, as well as forest management. It would also address the timing of the issuance of type 2 tree permits that are associated with building permits, and as well as the expiration of a type 2 permit associated with building permits. And the issue we're really trying to address here is that the current code says that staff shall issue a decision within 2 business days of the end of the comment period for type 2 and forest management permits. And when you have tree permits that are associated with building permits, those are reviewed concurrently for good reason, because we don't want to approve a tree cutting permit to remove trees for a building that we aren't certain complies with the code standards like setbacks, lot coverage, height, all of those. And we also don't want to issue a building permit without assuring that they've obtained the appropriate tree permits and that they're approved to do that. That's why they run concurrently. And with the current code requirement where we have to issue a decision within 2 business days, we often the process to review the building permit takes longer than the 2-week comment period for a tree permit. So the current staff practice has been, we'll let the comment period go, we'll hold on to the comments and we'll reserve issuing a notice of tentative decision until we've confirmed that the project complies with the code and that the tree removal is in fact necessary. And then we go ahead, once we confirm that, then we will issue the notice of tentative decision, and the process will move forward as it currently does. The people who submitted comments, the applicant, and the neighborhood association in which the site is located is provided notice of that tentative decision. So it doesn't change how the process works in terms of who receives the notice or who has standing to appeal. It just allows us the time that we need in order to make sure that the building permit had been reviewed before we issue the decision on the type 2 application. It also assures that once we do issue a tree cutting permit for a type 2 associated with the building permit, that we issue it concurrently with the building permit. This is again a current practice, but it's not specified in the code. And so we aren't going to expire the permit while we're waiting for the building permit process to complete itself. And then we will issue the tree permit along with the building permit concurrently. And this, it doesn't eliminate the possibility, but it significantly reduces the possibility that someone would get a tree permit, remove the trees, and then not follow through with the building permit that was the cause of the removal, by making sure that those are issued simultaneously. And then finally, in dealing with the expiration of a type 2 tree cutting permit, oftentimes construction phasing may not be able to be done in time before the permit expires. A permit is good for 60 days for a type 2 tree cutting application. So this would codify our current practices. As long as someone has a valid building permit, we aren't going to expire their tree permit, because it just creates a hassle for the applicant and more work for staff to have to redo these tree cutting permits just because they weren't able to phase the construction in time. So that's a quick synopsis of these proposed amendments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Wetmore, you have a question.
Yeah, Jessica, on the syncing up of the tree permit and the building permit, let's say somebody has a house and they want to put on, say, an addition, and they know that the addition is going to be $50,000 and they don't want to get involved in a architect and all that kind of stuff until they know that they could maybe remove a tree, and that, and so in this process, can they get the decision on the tree and then move forward with getting the design building? Because what I guess my point is that investing a lot of money in architectural plans and all that kind of stuff on the building part would be very expensive. And if they find out that they can't remove the tree, then they're stuck. And so I'm trying to allow the process to minimize expenses if we won't approve it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it is tricky. We do occasionally get that with smaller additions or pools. It's common. We get that question a lot with, and the answer is we aren't able to issue a permit without the building permit if that's the reason for removal. So it really needs to be done concurrently. However, what we have allowed them to do is, if they want to provide the site plan showing where the addition is going to go, but not go through the the engineering and all the things that they need to do, then we can review it and let them know, and we can show that it complies with setbacks and lot coverage and that, but we will not issue the permit without the building permit. So
right, but
yeah,
can you give a tentative approval and then permit? And this is the
based on a site plan. We could, for like a pool, for an addition, it's more difficult because there's a lot of other standards. For pools, it's pretty simple because you're just dealing with setbacks, right? But when you're dealing with additions, there's side setback planes, side yard appearance and screening. There's lot coverage, height, floor area. There's just too many standards. So it's really usually not possible to do that for house additions.
Right, but you're saying then you would not approve the tree addition or the tree permit or give tentative approval on removing the tree. So what happens if they go through the whole process and spend all the money to do the building part, and then you deny them on the tree.
Well, I mean, this is the part where we have to have some customer service. So what we'll do is we'll talk with the applicant, we'll look over their site plan, we'll look at the site and the tree. It's possible, not always, but we may be able to visit the site and give them some idea of whether we see issues, because the bottom line is if there is a tree that's in the middle of really the only place that they can put an addition, there's a good chance that they're going to get approval. I mean, unless you basically need to show that there aren't any reasonable alternatives if it's a significant tree. If we're talking about a smaller tree that is not significant, it's really probably not going to be an issue, because then you're not forced to look at whether there are reasonable alternatives to its removal if it's not a significant tree. So we'll talk to the applicant more. We'll try to see if we can view it on Street View or visit the site to kind of help them and give them a better sense of where we think the decision may come, but we can't give them absolute certainty.
And I think that we have a problem, because I have an issue when you have two pieces of the puzzle, and one is a very inexpensive piece to find out whether it's yes or no before you move on and spend a lot of money on development fees. Because I mean, for you to have a architect and everyone else and really figure out the plans, if you don't know that you can knock the tree down, then you're sinking a lot of money into, the government is costing our private citizens a lot of money and investment on unsure decisions, and that's where I see conflict in the process. And I would rather be, and I know you guys are great at working with customers and so on. I'm not saying that, but when it comes to the letter of the law, if somebody goes through that whole process and they spend $25,000 on a builder and architectural plans and everything else, and then the city denies them the tree permit, we're probably going to have an upset citizen when we probably should have known whether they could take the tree out or not. And I'm not saying issue the permit, I'm just saying approve the condition upon acceptable plans, just so that it gets sequencing done in a efficient manner that's the least costly. That's all my point is on that.
Councilor Coelho.
So I've had a chance to talk with Director Siegel, and I want to make sure that I do understand that in practice, up till now, we've kind of had a situation where both the building permit and the tree permit was ripe, so to speak, that it was ready for that to be issued. And if someone was going to appeal it, it would be appealed at that point. And so this is actually bringing into code what is already in reality how it works. Am I correct in how I've said that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been current staff practice that because the building permit review takes longer than the two-week tree comment period, we will go through the comment period, we will put the application on hold, which we note that on the web page if people are checking on it. And then once we have finished our building permit review, then we will issue the notice of tentative decision, just like we always do, to the same people who would receive notice if we did it within 2 business days. And then we'll go through the 1-week appeal period. And if no appeal is filed, then both permits can be issued.
So the other follow-up question is that this code change would not change the level of burden on an appealing person. In other words, they could appeal on one aspect, be it either the building or the tree or some pieces of both. In other words, the effect of it is still not going to change the substance of a proposed appeal.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ahmad.
So I'm a little confused because we get a lot of residents that say the tree permit process is out of sync with the building permit process, and we're trying to address this. As Councilor Wendland noted, and as some of our tree advocates note, full design, detailed site plans get done, and then the tree process comes later, and then it's a fight to have to go back to change the plans. Are you trying to say that right now everything is reviewed together so that we can know upfront, even in a conceptual trace paper study type front end, trees are in or out versus have to play catch up 3 or 4 weeks or months later. I'm confused as to what we're doing here with this permit consolidation.
So right now, there is concurrent review. When you submit a building permit, it's a package. It's both the tree permit or tree application, excuse me, as well as the building permit application. Now, if it's associated with a development like a partition or you know, a new commercial building, we have a pre-app process, and we talk to the applicants up front. We talk about trees. We meet with them, so they're very well aware of the tree issues and the need to design around significant trees if possible. With regarding to you know, just people who are putting on additions or building new homes, you know, again, they're coming to the planning counter most often or calling us and talking about those ahead of time. So we can talk about trees at that point. But you're right, we don't have any sort of pre-approval process for the trees. It is done concurrently. The tree removal application and the building permit application are really reviewed concurrently.
Other questions? All right. Okay, Mr. Siegel, you had something you want to say?
Thank you, Mayor. And I would just add that, you know, some of the other moving parts on this, just with a straight building permit application, the stormwater facilities have to be looked at in context, you know, where the sewer lateral water is going to go. There are any number of variables in there. And so the concurrent review, although it doesn't offer certainty on any of those, it does allow the city and the staff in the various departments that look at this to talk with one another, to coordinate, to look for solutions, to work with the applicant and try to resolve that. Whereas if we were to do this in more of a linear fashion, and I think the city used to do it that way actually, where, you know, sequential review, then you can end up in a loop that's less efficient, I would say. That's all I had to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Wayland.
And my point is really not for the big developers or people that are building houses. I'm looking for the people who don't know. They're the weekend warriors that go out and want to build a deck, or they want to build and do things right, and they have no experience dealing with the city. They want to be good citizens and they want to get a permit and do everything by the book, but I'm looking for minor projects that they don't, you know, if all of a sudden they have to invest a couple $1,000s to get a plan together, and then they won't get approval on a tree, that's where I think the rub is. For developers that go through this and they're professionals, I think you're right on and spot on to do it how you're doing it. I'm just looking out for the little person that or not, they don't have to be a little person, the infrequent person that really doesn't use our services, doesn't know our lingo, wants to conform to the city standards, but will be totally confused if they, you know, well, what do you mean? I have to get this and then I have to get this done. And I think you have a very helpful staff, but I just want to make sure our policy helps, that it's broad enough that it helps the weekend project person that wants to get a permit, and to make sure that they have, that they can go through some sort of a sequence, even if it's just a tentative approval, to say, hey, you know what, you'll be able to knock down the tree if you build your deck this way, but I need to still see plans on the deck. That's what I think citizens want to know about. So anyway, food for thought.
Ms. Simpson, do we have anybody else who wants to make comment or testify on this?
No one has requested to offer testimony on this item today.
Have we actually had somebody request to land a helicopter in Lake Oswego then? I mean,
yes.
That is a true private citizen?
Yes. Talking about landing in your driveway.
Well,
because I was in the market to buy one, but maybe now I'm not going to. No, I
was a previous city manager. I had to deal with that.
So big picture on the helicopter part, we're really saying that we do not want to have helicopters land in Lake Oswego except on an emergency basis. Is that correct? I mean, that's the intent.
Well, emergency or with the approval of the city manager.
Right, but
So
that's-
maybe, you know, if a person wanted to establish a helicopter landing zone, they, you know, go through the FAA process and they could get city manager approval, considering the factors that are laid out.
Okay, because I think most people in Lake Oswego don't want to have a helicopter landing pad in the city. It's we just aren't rural enough, and it's I don't know if you've lived in a city near a helicopter pad, but it's pretty normal.
John, you could have Santa Claus, for example, land in the city.
Yeah. So
Okay, I'll make a motion that we enact ordinance 2854, clarifying, revising, and updating the Lake Oswego Code.
Mayor, Councillor Kohlhoff had her hand
I'm
up.
sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead, Councilor Kohlhoff, I'm sorry.
It was just that section. I was waiting to hear about the distance at the roadway intersections. So are we going to do that differently or
No.
separately?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Will Farley,
I
Will
like
Farley is available?
42.03.130 site density of roadway intersections, private streets and driveways. I just had a question about that, and that is probably could be answered by Director Rooney about, let's say you have a specific intersection. The one that was brought to my attention was up on McVeigh. And evidently that's the wrath of God at certain times of day. Is there that possibility of you know, changing these ASH2 standards in a specific circumstance that we determine the ASH2 standard is not as safe as we need it to be? That was my question.
I can pipe in for Director Rooney. The part that's being changed is the stopping sight distance, which is the minimum distance needed for safety. So what's being added to the code is we can look at the 85th percentile speeds or the design of the roadway. The 85th percentile speeds make sure that 85% of the people are driving, or it's the speed at which 85% of the people are driving at or under. So when it comes to stopping sight distance, the lesser standard, we're just making sure people can stop in time. We still prefer intersection sight distance, and this isn't changing any part of that code, which is comfort. So McVeigh would probably go towards intersection sight distance where people can enter the roadway without impacting traffic.
That answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I did, Councilor Kohlhoff, I didn't see your hand. Any other questions? Okay, then I will again make the motion to move to enact ordinance 2854, clarifying, revising, and updating Lake Oswego Code.
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded. Discussion, please. Okay, no discussion. Madam Recorder, will you call the roll?
Mayor Studebaker,
Yes?
Councillor Kohlhoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
Wendland,
yes.
and Mans.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. All right, next item of business is item 5.3, which is an annexation proposed on Harrington Road, Harrington Avenue. Mr. Espy, you're going to be joining us on this, right?
He is, but I would do the preliminaries if I may, Mayor.
Please.
All right. This is the time for a public hearing on ordinance 2852, an ordinance annexing to the city of Lake Oswego one parcel consisting of 0.28 acres at 5950 Southwest Harrington Avenue and public rights of way at Harrington Avenue and Mellon Avenue, declaring city of Lake Oswego zoning pursuant to LOC 50-01004.5A to C, and removing the territory from certain districts. This is application AN 20-0005. This is a land use request which involves the application of the criteria and standards listed in the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria as listed in the staff report or such other criteria that you believe apply to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the City Council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. And the failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to any proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the City Council to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The public hearing process is as follows: presentation by staff, testimony by the applicant of up to 20 minutes, testimony by others. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Groups and neighborhood associations, or the recognized neighborhood association, government agencies, and other incorporated public interest organizations will have up to 10 minutes to testify. The applicant will then have 5 minutes for rebuttal, followed by questions of staff. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Since this is the initial evidentiary hearing, council, prior to closing the public hearing, a party who testifies before you tonight may request an opportunity to present additional evidence. And if the party so requests, either the public hearing will be continued to a date certain not less than 7 days later, or the record will remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing to enable the party to submit additional written evidence or testimony. At this point, I would like to ask the City Council.
David, before you go on, I think we lost Councilor Manns.
All right.
And so before we go do what you're about to do, it seems like we need to have everyone who's going to hear the matter present.
I think that's important. Thank you for pointing
Give
that
us
out.
just a moment, please.
And we were also going to bring others into the panel at this point as well, because they have a chance to make challenges to city councilors' qualifications under the initial hearing process.
Okay, Councilor Manns is rejoining the meeting, and then those who are participating in the hearing, Mr. Powell, are also joining the meeting.
Thank you.
And it looks like we have all of them now.
All right, thank you. So at this point, I would ask if any city councilor wishes to make a declaration in relation to a number of items. First, of course, is ex parte contacts, in which case, if there are any, then the fact that an ex parte contact has been had should be stated, and the substance of that should be described. Next would be as to bias, and finally, as to any conflicts of interest. And Mayor, I see someone hands up.
I see number, Councilor Cole.
So as a matter of transparency, I would like to make a declaration first with ex parte contacts. Sometime around June, as far as I know, I did get a call from the applicant. He said that he had bought property and would need to annex it. I don't think that's me. And I specifically said, I bet it's a cherry stem. And he said, yes. And then I said, oh, this ex parte contact, we need to get off the phone, stop talking about it. Shortly after that, I got a call from, I don't know that you need a name, if you do need a name, of a woman who said that the applicant had called all the members, and that in fact this was not so much a cherry stem as a need to become an elector. I then talked to my husband, Mike Kohlhoff, who had been highly involved in researching all the minutes for the last 3.5 years on behalf of another project of mine. And shortly after that, I had a contact with, through reading a complaint made by John Berman. And it was at that point that I found out that the annexation had nothing to do with a larger issue that I was concerned about. And I haven't really paid a lot of attention after that. I did get a text from a woman that I was able to hunt down who said that there would be a big surprise for me at this annexation hearing. But short of those contacts, I've pretty much written them out of the script. Bias, as you know, the record shows that I have voted against all of the cherry stems. Once it came to my attention, and I have believed myself entirely entitled to vote against all the cherry stems. I think there was one that I messed up on, and I have consulted with our city attorney about that. As it relates to conflicts of interest, I've checked with the Ethics Commission, and they said I had a potential conflict, but in this circumstance, it was just about the annexation. It would have no effect. As it relates to a larger issue that was of concern to me, I'm going to nonetheless, however, recuse myself because I think it's the professional and collegial thing to do, especially given the posture of the case. I have been very proud of the council. There was at no time an elephant in the room. In the room, I have believed that all the councilors have acted honorably and have voted as they would under any other circumstance. But that is what I intend to do, is to recuse.
Thank you, Councilor Quayle. Councilman Lamont.
I would first start with, I think it's no secret that I've been opposed to cherry stems for a long time. It's bad policy. Other cities around the country don't allow them for the inefficiency that they are. And we've had some good, robust discussions about our policy of benign neglect, which is not really a good policy. And I've been opposed to them. And unlike what the attorney for the applicant indicated that we have to vote for them, we have not voted for them and we don't support them. I have had several phone conversations and emails with the applicant through mostly June, where he was lobbying the whole council one by one to try and get this annexation straightened out. I have in front of me a short email that I will read. It was from Erica Rooney, our Director of Engineering, to Joe Buck at Babbage-Cahen, copied Paul Espy. Joe, the liabilities, in quotes, I refer to go beyond the demand for improved payment. We become responsible for everything that happens in the right-of-way. Signs, potholes, stormwater runoff problems, trees, street opening permits from contractors, including PG and Northwest Natural, parking complaints, speeding, and more. Essentially, we inherit all the responsibility of the roadway area, with hardly any adjacent properties contributing funds to those increased assets or issues. They don't pay street maintenance fees, nor do they add to our gas tax revenue or even the general fund, all of which helps support the overall street fund for maintaining all issues and matters within the right-of-way. So the liability, in quotes, is not a specific dollar amount per se, but more of a large increase in assets without any compensation. Also, these cherry stem areas create no end of confusion. The county is responsible for land use actions on private property issues and septic issues, for example, but the city has the road authority, and this is always a point of confusion for everyone involved.
Mr. Lamont, Mr. Lamont.
I'm almost done, man.
No, this is not answering the question of,
right.
This is like you're testifying against cherry stem.
City attorney.
I understand your position, but that would be something you should be doing in discussion if you stay on to be in the voting part.
The city attorney.
Not now.
He's advised us. He's advised me that if there's conflicts of interest, that I should declare them, and I'm declaring it. The second thing is bias. I'm against them, so I'm declaring it. The third thing is I'm a mayoral candidate in the city of Lake Oswego, so there's a conflict of interest. The fact that he lobbied us during our campaign is a conflict of interest.
All right,
I am recusing myself from this vote.
All right, thank you for getting to it. Councilor O'Neill.
I have spoken with Joe at the very beginning, probably before anyone else. because my wife sold Joe the house, but I initiated the conversation to Joe to make sure he had had a conversation with David Powell that he was eligible to run for office. As far as any other issues, yes, my wife sold the house. Myself personally, I've worked for the Buck family as a general contractor, but I don't believe any of those things will have an effect on how I will vote on this annexation. I think I've been pretty clear for the last 8 years of doing almost 50 of these annexations. I don't think I've voted any different on all 50 of them.
All right. Anything else? Councilor Wendland?
Well, in the almost 2 years of sitting on city council, I have not had to answer these questions other than I have no issues. But with this one, I do have to respond. With respect to the ex parte contact, the applicant did call me specifically and ask if I would support his annexation into the city of Lake Oswego if he purchased his property that he had an offer on. At the time, the applicant had already announced his candidacy for a city council position. So this was definitely an awkward conversation. I did express that in general, I support the unincorporated property owners that want to come into the city to be annexed. So that's always been my position. However, I did not have specific information about this property and told him that it would depend on the actual application and the proper channels that we had to go through. I did suggest that he might consider buying a property inside the city to remove this issue, but that went on deaf ears. With respect to bias, I do want to disclose that the applicant changed from running for council. I did endorse the applicant for city council. And then when he flipped to running for mayor, I was already supporting another mayoral candidate and continue to endorse this mayoral candidate. So there may be some bias. In addition, the outcome of both council's decision on this issue and the outcome of the election both have implicit bias involved. If the amendment is approved or not approved, but the applicant is elected, the council and specifically myself could be accused of bias with either decision. With respect to conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest, I don't think I have any, but I would say that my observation of this entire annex application is that the applicant has made this a complicated, awkward, and uncomfortable process for City Hall, city staff, city recorder, our city attorney, and our council. I know countless hours have been spent that could have been directed elsewhere. And what should be a straightforward bureaucratic city process has ended up into a messy and complicated political manner before this council. But all that being said, I feel that I can make a decision based on just the facts, and I will be participating in this process.
Sir Wendland, if I may follow up with your earlier comment, you mentioned some items that I think you characterized as would be bias or such, but what I'm hearing you say to clarify, in a legal sense, it's not bias if you can nevertheless base your decision only on the criteria and the facts as you heard. Am I assuming then you're saying you are not biased in the sense that you are able to base your decision only on those criteria?
I can make my decision purely on a cherry stem annexation application.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Nguyen.
Yes, so with regards to the question of a conflict of interest, I don't believe I have any. As far as bias, I could see how there could be the perception of bias, being that I like Joe, I support him for mayor, and I endorsed him publicly for mayor. But that said, I do believe that I will be able to make a bureaucratic decision. There's something that's very, in other times, very mundane decision. So I will commit to only reviewing the facts of the case to make the decision.
Councilor Mann.
I have no conflict of interest. I feel I have no bias, although I will disclose that I had endorsed Joe Buck when he was running for council, however, have not endorsed anyone who's running for mayor. As far as my duty to examine only the facts of this case, I feel I can fulfill that 100% without bias, without conflict of interest, or even without the perception of bias.
Okay, I will declare that I've talked with Joe Buck, but not about this issue. And I don't have any bias or any conflict of interest. So with that, Mr. Powell, are we ready to proceed?
Well, at this point, we would ask if any of the people here tonight would challenge any city councilor's right to hear this application. And hearing none.
Wait a minute, Councilor Lamont.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah. The previous line to this email is talk to Kent, Skip, Jackie, I'll remain on board, still need to talk to Wendland. That was on June 25th, 2020. Just for the record.
All right, so a couple of things. I'm not hearing any challenge to any city councilor's right to hear this. Madam City Recorder, I believe that Councilor Kohlhoff and Councilor Lamont would be moved into the observer category rather than the panel category.
That's correct. We'll do that now. Of course, they can continue to see and hear everything in that waiting room, and they will be brought back into the meeting when we get to item 6, information from council.
Okay. And with that, Mayor, we're ready for the staff report.
All right, Mr. Espy, please proceed.
Thank you, David. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Paul Espy, Long Range Planning. I will go ahead and share a screen that has my presentation on it. Okay, this property is located at 5950 Harrington Avenue and is approximately 0.28 acres. Staff received, before I get started on all of the particulars, I want to get started on the correspondence. We received 9 pieces of correspondence, 7 of which were in opposition and 2 were in favor of the annexation. 2 of the letters were received from Mike Koloff, exhibits E3 and E5. Staff also received a phone call from Linda Kellentine, exhibit E4. She stated that she didn't feel that the annexation was noticed to enough people and was concerned that future increases in property taxes and utilities would displace many of the area residents that Lake Oswego and that Lake Oswego regulations were too strict. She also stated that she felt that the only reason that the applicant was annexing the property was to legitimize his bid for mayor. Staff received other letters of opposition from Norma Holcomb, exhibit E6, Marilyn Rust, exhibit E7, Winona Hoffinger, exhibit E8, Rosemary Dispenza Henry, exhibit E10, and the letter from Mrs. Rust expressed concerns regarding cherry stem annexations, the fairness of the applicant receiving city services when other people in the unincorporated area received services from Clackamas County, the prospect of forced annexations with higher property taxes and utility fees, the condition of adjacent roadways and the related costs for those upgrades, for the upgrades of those roadways, stormwater upgrades and the costs associated with those, duplication of city services, and also inadequate notification. Staff will address these issues throughout the course of the evening's presentation. Staff also received 2 letters, exhibit E9 and E11, and one phone call in favor of the annexation. One letter was received from the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association, exhibit E9, expressing support for the annexation process and allowing property owners to apply for annexation applications. But the association was opposed to forced annexations by the city or island annexations. Staff also received a phone call from an adjacent resident at 16316 Lake Forest Avenue, who was also in favor of the annexation and providing sewer or sanitary sewer to the area. The second letter in favor was received from the applicant's representative, Jeff Condit of Miller Nash Graham and Dunn Law Firm, and this letter responds to the issues raised by the opposing parties. Staff responded to several of the points in the call-off and other letters related to the review of the annexation and the council report, and provided some additional information. I'll present that briefly. With regards to the 90-day filing deadline, on occasion, staff may accept applications less than 90 days before the prospective hearing date when workload allows and the code requirements for processing the application, including noticing, can be met. And we've done this for a number of applications in the past when there has been delays in the providing the title report or other components of the application. Regarding ex parte contact, at the time of the public hearing, members of the City Council, as they have, will have the opportunity to disclose any ex parte contacts that they may have regarding the application, as well as to make any necessary declarations related to conflict of interest or bias. And then the letter discussed conflict of interest and bias, residential qualification, monetary gain from real estate commission. And in this instance, staff agrees with the applicant's representative that the tentative decision made on election night avoids potential conflicts of interest and should not affect the outcome. If the final annexation ordinance is approved on November 17th, the ordinance would not become effective until December 17th, and probably sometime thereafter that, because it needs to be accepted by the Secretary of State, Oregon Department of Revenue, Metro, and the county. So if the annexation is approved this evening, it won't become effective until well after the date of the election. And then regarding cherry stem annexations, staff reviewed the minutes, and at the September 2018 council meeting, a motion was made, I believe, by Councilor Goodman, and then seconded by Councilor Lamott. It was made to discontinue cherry stem annexations. But before the vote on the motion, the city manager clarified that the motion was preliminary, and it was preliminary direction from council, and that staff would return with specific policy language implementing that particular direction. So then at the September 18th, 2018 council meeting, staff presented a draft resolution which addressed the lot by lot and cherry stem annexations. And as we all know, motions on that resolution failed, and the council did not provide any direction to conduct additional research or prepare a revised annexation policy, but instead worked on other policy issues. Therefore, without an ordinance or specific policy language prohibiting cherry stem annexation, staff has interpreted the motion on the policy resolution addressing cherry stem annexations as ineffective. So as a result, staff adheres to the existing city code, the comprehensive plan, and the applicable Oregon statutes and Metro Code requirements while following the city's existing published friendly annexation policies. And we felt that this course of action was really the best way to go to provide consistency and a degree of certainty for citizens when they are making applications for annexation. And then in response to the follow-up letter from Mr. Koloff that was received on October 26th, the letter assumes that the council approves the Harrington Street annexation. It must approve subsequent cherry stem annexations, and notwithstanding the council's failure to disallow cherry stem annexations, the council should apply general economic principles to actually deny it. And again, staff agrees with the applicant's representative that the land use decision has to be reviewed under the standards and criteria in effect at the time of the application, and the council should not arbitrarily change policy to deny an application that otherwise complies with those applicable codes and criteria. Mr. Condon's letter goes on to say that the city's comprehensive plan commits the city to annexation and providing services for the areas. The city is obligated to plan and provide services to the area regardless of when it is annexed. However, nothing in the city code requires the city to fund public services to this property upon annexation. And neither the city engineer nor police nor fire recommend the denial of the annexation, but they could find a basis for denying future cherry stem annexations based on fiscal impact or diminished service levels as additional annexations proceed. And of course, the city council could approve the Harrington Street annexation and deny future cherry stem annexations, finding that they reach a tipping point relative to the service delivery, emergency responders, streets, and that sort of thing. And so with that, the annexation of this property would include annexation of approximately 860 feet of public right-of-way along Mellon and Harrington Avenues. Public right-of-way along Mellon Avenue is a Clackamas County public local access road, and the maintenance jurisdiction and permitting authority for this street will automatically fall under the city's jurisdiction and maintenance upon annexation. With response to concerns about future roadway and paving, the Urban Growth Management Agreement and City Comprehensive Plan requires public facilities to be provided within the urban services boundary in a manner adopted by the Public Facilities Plan. And these roadways will be added to the city's pavement management inventory and considered and prioritized in conjunction with other streets throughout the city for future rehabilitation programming. This annexation is very similar to the annexation of properties directly south of the subject property at 5957 Seville, approved by the City Council in 2010. Other cherry stem annexations include annexed territory along Don Street, approved in 2017, 5785 Kimball Court, approved in 2017, 6030 Shakespeare Street, approved in 2017, and 5850 Bonita Road, approved in 2018. A little bit on noticing. In response to concerns regarding notification, the city's provided written notification of this annexation to necessary parties, surrounding properties, and through the posting of the notice of the annexation on the properties on October 14th, 2020, 20 days prior to the date of public hearing, as required under Metro Code 3009-030B and applicable state law. The notice contained the information about the affected territory, time, place, public hearing, and the means by which a person can obtain copies of the staff report or other materials. And because of the proposed right-of-way annexation, 28 surrounding properties were within the 100-foot radius required for noticing. So it actually resulted in the notification of far many more properties than if you were just to annex the sole property. Sewer and water service. Sanitary sewer service is available from the City of Lake Oswego collection line approximately 1,600 feet south of the property at the intersection of Lake Forest and Washington Court. The future sewer extension could be constructed along Lake Forest Boulevard to the property. A second option for sewer extension would be from an existing Lake Oswego collection line located over 1,800 feet away at the intersection of Washington Court and Wright Lane. This would extend north from Washington Court along Astor Avenue, not Mellon, and the street, and east along Harrington Avenue to the property. And the line cannot be extended to the property from the manhole in Mellon because the sewer line would be too shallow for that location, so it would have to go around to Astor instead. The property owner has recently replaced the septic system and redeveloped the property, and they do not intend to extend or connect to the existing sanitary line. Property is served by the Lake Grove Water District and would remain a Lake Grove Water District customer. And the nearest existing fire hydrant is located along the site at the intersection of Harrington Avenue and Southwest Lake Forest Boulevard. With regards to fire and police and other potential service duplication, the city maintains its mutual aid agreements with abutting county and fire districts and would not impair service or cost the city additional funds to serve this property. And then after annexation, the on-site surface water management would fall under various provisions of the Lake Oswego Code if development triggers it. But it does not appear that there's any new impervious surfaces that would be proposed as a part of the annexation. All the development has mostly been done out there already. So staff finds that the property is within the urban services boundary and future sewer has been anticipated and planned for the city's sewer master plan, and future roadway improvements will be prioritized and funded through the city's pavement management inventory and will be considered in conjunction with other streets throughout the city for future rehabilitation and programming. Further, the property cannot be further divided and no development or increase in service burden is anticipated. And staff finds that the annexation is timely with regards to the public facilities and recommends approval at this point. Staff has suggested a council motion to tentatively approve Ordinance 2852 and direct staff to present a final ordinance with findings on November 17th, 2020. And with the decision of the annexation, council could provide direction on a future policy which would include some limitations on cherry stem annexations in the future, but we'd also need to consider a revision to comprehensive plan policies to allow sewer connections to be made prior to annexations for those properties that would experience septic emergencies. And that concludes what my presentation, and I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Espy? All right, thank you, Mr. Espy. All right, next, the applicant has 20 minutes to present their request for annexation.
Okay, Mr. Condit, you'll see this timer appear. I'll go ahead and start it, but I won't hold it up here until the last 5 minutes. You'll hear a beep when your time is over. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Studebaker, members of the council. My name is Jeff Condit. I'm an attorney at Norton Ash Graham and Dunn in Portland, and I represent Joe Buck, the applicant for this partition or this annexation. Right off the bat, I want to express how appreciative I was of the council conversation and the conflicts and ex parte contact. I really think that was well done, and we appreciate those comments. And we understand that this does create a awkward situation, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to set it over so it was on election day. But I think in the main, I want to express that the fact that Mr. Buck is a candidate for mayor and there's issues with his residency is completely irrelevant to the issue before you tonight. And I think the councilors expressed that. The question is whether or not this particular annexation application complies with the applicable criteria, and for the reasons stated in the staff report and by Mr. Espy, we think that it does and should be approved. I want to briefly address a couple of issues that were raised in the opposition. First, with regard to the council policy or lack thereof on cherry stem annexations. We agree with staff that it was clear at the September 18th meeting that the city manager clarified that that was a preliminary decision before the vote, and that when the council voted on that, that was the understanding of the council. And the council, of course, could have corrected that when it approved the minutes, but it did not do so. So the effect of that motion was not to change your policy with regard to cherry stem annexations. And when the change policy came before you, it did not pass. So the actual extent policy is the one quoted in the staff report where you support individual annexations regardless of whether they allow irregular boundaries. And again, as Mr. Espy said, this approval of this section tonight, or this annexation application tonight, does not bind you to approve future annexation applications. And if the council does desire to limit cherry stem applications, the appropriate way to do that would be to actually develop a policy that does that and adopt it, and then apply it prospectively to new applications. But as Mr. Espy said, the state statute requires you to apply the standards and criteria in effect at the time of application. And the current policy with regard to individual applications is the one that's quoted in the staff report. I also note that a motion really is not effective to change a policy. You would have to have replacement language and actually repealed or amended the existing policy. So it was clear that the motion was intended to be preliminary. Going on, I wanted to talk a little bit about the general costs, it's when you have these existing urban level subdivisions that were allowed to develop under county jurisdiction back in the bad old days, and you do have these issues. But the comprehensive plan, as Mr. Espy points out, has already made the decision that you're going to ultimately annex and serve this area, and you're planning for it. So those are costs the cities is going to have to face at some point, regardless of whether you allow cherry stem annexations or permit this annexation to proceed. And I think one of the things that the council needs to consider if it does up the cherry stem annexation matter again in the future is the impact on your ability to achieve that comprehensive plan policy. Oftentimes with this type of urban subdivision, there's not a lot of additional development that can occur on the site. The great rate of opinion, as you can see from some of the testimony, is to not join the city because they don't want to pay taxes or higher utilities. So you really do need to consider that impact and think about whether it's all cherry stem annexations or just some cherry stem annexations, and how that would affect your ability to achieve your comprehensive plan. So turning around to some of the individual comments, the majority of the property owners that testified in opposition raised cost of service issues first. I note that this property has an existing house on it. It is too small to be partitioned, and so it will not have any impacts that would require any kind of improvements to any of the public facilities on that street. And also, it has, as the staff report notes, a relatively new sanitary septic system on site. So this property is not likely to cause the need to extend sewer services anytime soon. Turning to the other issue, which is concern about being forced to annex because of the cherry stem annexation. As I noted, that cherry stem annexation statute was amended in 2007 as a result of the Nike City of Beaverton war. For those of you who were around at the time, Nike accused the city of trying to use cherry stems to surround its campus and annex it into the city. And as a result, that statute was amended so that you can't, essentially to prohibit that. So if more than 20% of the surrounding territory that creates the island is just public right-of-way, that does not qualify for cherry stem annexation. And if you look at the map and you see the surrounding properties, it's going to be years and years and years away before any of the properties would actually face potential forced island annexation. And I would also note that even though the statute permits the city council to force annexation in the case of an island annexation, nothing requires you to do so. And the council's policy has been, I understand, not to force annexation. So I think I completely understand that fear, but I don't think that fear is going to result from approval of this particular application before you tonight. Same thing about increase in property taxes. The only thing that's getting annexed, in addition to my client's property, is the right-of-way. The fact that the right-of-way is within the city or our county is not going to affect the valuation of the surrounding residential properties. So while I understand the concerns, I don't think those concerns are supported by the evidence of the record. And finally, I would like to thank the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association for supporting the annexation. I know my client appreciates that. And unless the council has any questions, that's my presentation.
Questions, anybody? Thank you, Mr. Condit. Do we have anybody else testifying in favor of this annexation?
There you have two individuals who would like to speak this evening. The first is Mike Kolha. Mr. Kolha, if you could turn on your mic.
Is this testimony in favor of the annexation?
No.
All right, I'm asking if we have any testimony in favor of the annexation.
No.
All right, then it's time now to goes into opposition. So if Mr. Kohlhoff is in that category, let's call him.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Mr. Kohlhoff, if you could go ahead and turn on your microphone, and your video is optional.
Okay, I think I've unmuted.
Yes, that's correct. You have 5 minutes and you'll hear a beep at the end of the 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Studebaker, members of the City Council. My name is Mike Kohlhoff. I reside at 3122 Diane Drive, Lake Oswego, Oregon. My concern is policy. On September 18th, 2018, staff made 3 recommendations regarding annexation. Recommendation number 2, quote, at least on a trial basis, discontinue, quote, cherry stem annexations, unquote, and direct staff to return with a more logical and efficient policy, unquote. In the ensuing discussion, Councilor Lamont listed reasons to disallow cherry stem, noting questions from residents, and it was a, quote, matter of fiscal responsibility. Councilor Kohlhoff likewise opposed cherry stem on policy grounds. Councilor Manns noted that they were, quote, patently unfair. Councilor Buck had concerns over inequities of subsidies for services. Manager Lasby and Director Siegel both commented that discontinuing them would allow staff to work on larger area annexations. Motion by Councilor Goodman to, quote, no longer do cherry stems was unanimously adopted. That's all reflected in the minutes, September 18th, 2018. The motion was simple, direct, and unambiguous. However, it did not contain any plain, ordinary language of being temporary. The minutes reflect the manager's comments of preliminary direction was after the motion was made and was gratuitous. The December 18th, 2018 minutes provided that an ordinance was proposed with a more comprehensive annexation policy, including that for cherry stems. But that died based on an attempt to amend the ordinance. Nothing was adopted. I respectfully submit that staff misconstrues the law of implied repeal. It would come into play if the December 18th, 2018 ordinance had been adopted. When no action is taken, nothing is repealed. The earlier action stands, preliminary or no. In 2016, in order to increase the supply of housing, the legislature lowered the bar for area-wide land annexations through a consent of owners and electors process and expressly preempted local voting requirements. In other words, easier to build housing. That's ORS 222127. The statute also provided at the same time that the proposal for annexation confirmed to all other requirements of the city's ordinances. An area-wide annexation is not before you, and you obviously know that. But it's important to know that 2 things are clear. Each petition for a consensual cherry stem is heard on its own merits, and the fiscal cost considerations is very much a part of state and local land use law when it comes to providing public facilities such as roads. For any annexation to be reasonable, it must be demonstrated to be consistent with local or state land use criteria, and that's in Mossman versus City of Madras. I would also state that statewide Goal 11 deals with the provision of public facilities, including roads in urbanizable land within urban growth boundaries, which is within the city and what the city, I believe, calls its service boundary. Chapter 666 of the Oregon Administrative Rules implements Goal 11 and provides guidelines for cities, including that cost is a factor in providing public facilities to urbanizable land. The comprehensive plan of Lake Oswego, its code, and implementing ordinances and policies clearly support the efficient provision of public facilities, including transportation facilities such as roads. Land use laws also require cities to adopt and implement a facilities plan, also known as a capital improvements plan, with cost provisions for the orderly and efficient provision of public facilities over a 20-year period. That's the very issue of concern, the provision of efficient public facilities in September 18th, 2018 about cherry stem annexations led to that motion of denial. They create cost inefficiencies. The city's capital improvements plan is in its current 20-year cycle, as you well know. Thus,
Mr. Kohlhoff, you're muted somehow. Mr. Kohlhoff?
Anne Marie, can you unmute him?
Yep. Nope.
thank you.
Here we go.
I'm not sure where I left off, but
You left off with talking about legislation, I believe.
oh, wow.
Actually, I think it was CIP. He's muted again.
Mr. Kohlhoff, you're muted again. Mr. Kohlhoff?
I am not able to unmute him.
Mr. Powell, now what?
Okay, I think it's good.
Can
All right,
you
let's
do
do
that
that
now?
again. I'll watch for mute. I'll watch that on my side.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. As I started to say, land use law also provides cities to adopt and implement a facilities plan, also known as a capital improvements plan, with cost provisions for the orderly and efficient provision of public facilities over the 20-year period. The very issue of concern in September 18th, 2018 about cherry stem annexations was about the orderly and efficient provision of facilities. The city's capital improvement plan is in its current 20-year cycle. Thus, it is reasonable to interpret the council policy of disfavoring cherry stem annexation is based on land use fiscal concerns such as the efficient provision of public road infrastructure and is in keeping with an individualized review of cherry stem annexation petitions based on those concerns. Additionally, as Mr. Condit pointed out, the parcel contains a house. There is no effect on the supply of housing, just whether it's a house in the city or a house in the county. The real effect is on the provision of orderly and efficient provision of public facilities of the stem. The 3 road segments need to be fully reconstructed. They are not satisfactory to meet standards for public facilities. Reconstruction is a capital improvement. My experience and review indicates the cost will be approximately $250 million for those 3 segments. Once annexed and owned by the city, the capital improvement plans will need to be amended to include them. The annexation does not supply revenues anywhere near sufficient to cover the costs. The cost to city taxpayers is disproportionate to the return. COVID-19 and its aftermath make additional revenues highly unlikely. Kicking
Mr. Kohlhoff,
yeah.
we're giving you a little bit of additional time because of the interruptions, but are you about finished?
Yeah, I've just got a little more. I would just point out that if you kick the reconstruction costs down the road, that bears risk. The cost will go up, the life of the deteriorating roads may come more quickly, and the current 20-year improvement cycle will not be able to accomplish that if that happens, and with other city projects waiting in the wings. And waiting for an area-wide annexation to occur before that is also a risk. So waiting for this to occur is not good policy. And it is good policy to apply a cost-based approach, and it's in your land use ordinances and you're able to apply them. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry for technical difficulties, and thanks again for listening.
Thanks for your input, I appreciate it. Marilyn Rust is next, is that correct?
That's correct. Marlon Rust is in the meeting, and Ms. Rust, if you go ahead and unmute for us, and your video is optional.
Okay, am I ready?
You are ready, and I'm going to go ahead and set the timer. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, counselors and mayor, for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Marlene Rust, and I'm a retired teacher in the Lake Oswego School District. My husband and I have lived at 6145 Southwest Harrington for over 39 years. I previously submitted my written concerns regarding this proposed annexation. However, I would like to restate and add to my concerns. I understand the political nature of this annexation. However, I am addressing this strictly for the associated impacts as a property owner and neighbor. From my review, this annexation brings no benefits, but many costs, which have been discussed by other people at this meeting to the city of Lake Oswego. Here are examples. All of the roads being annexed have an unsatisfactory PCI of 30 or less. The current PCI satisfactory index is between 70 and 85. If this property is annexed, these roads will require the city to expend funds to bring the PCI index up to a satisfactory levels. The shift from county to city roads, city streets, road reconstruction is well over $200,000. Do taxpayers of the city of Lake Oswego want to pay the cost, all the benefit of just one homeowner? The petitioner's property will generate city taxes of $1,047, yet it will cost the city hundreds of thousands of dollars to repave, and they have to reconstruct the roads. Have any of you city councilors or mayor walked down Mellon Avenue lately? It's like walking on the moon. So it would be high priority for the city to pay for this paving. And I and the neighborhood association would make sure that would happen. Do you have the cost of the city of Lake Oswego? The annexation map shows the homeowner at 6073 Southwest Harrington will only get one half of its road paved in front of his house. I'm not sure how that happened. And next point I'd like to make is attachment B, page 5, quote, the city would increase the number of UIC storm facilities associated with the roadway systems by at least 2 new structures, end quote. Again, is the city willing to take on these additional costs for annexing just one home? There was a failure to notice all other 11 property owners on Harrington Avenue of the proposed annexation, which did not allow all of us to have input and a voice concerning this annexation. This is a failure of the city of Lake Oswego to assure a democratic process. The cherry picking was unanimously opposed in 2008, even by petitioner. On September 18, 2018, the City Council unanimously passed a motion to disallow cherry stem annexation. The City Councilors were Buck, O'Neill, Mance, Lamont, Kohlhoff, Goodman, and Mayor Studebaker. Some of you are present today. Nothing was followed up on this motion. Even if this annexation is approved, I strongly recommend the City Council undertake the development of written policies and rules associated with cherry picking, which I have heard other people say also in this meeting. 3 of the 5 homeowners on Southwest Mellon Avenue who were notified oppose this annexation. I am one of the 11 property owners on Southwest Harrington that was not informed of this annexation, but I oppose this annexation. It appears the city will incur more costs than benefits associated with this annexation. I find it hard to believe the city could approve this annexation if they truly are looking out for the benefit and welfare of all its citizens. Finally, on page 6, if you have the council report, does anybody have the council report in front of them? I hope the city attorney, David Powell, you do. On page 6 of the council report under annexation, it states, and I quote, the city council supports the policy of friendly annexation of residential areas, period. Annexation will be the consent of the owners of affected residential properties, ... end quote. If the city council approves this annexation, they are going against their own policy. The petitioner indicates this is a friendly annexation, which it is not. It is a most unfriendly annexation. Paul Espy, the planner, also mentioned, I think he was the one that mentioned, somebody mentioned that this would be or needed to be a friendly annexation. It is not a friendly annexation. Thank you for listening, councilors, mayor, and everybody else.
Thank you for your input, ma'am. All right. Now, do we have any testimony that's either favorable, that's neither favorable nor unfavorable?
No, we don't, Mayor.
All right, then the applicant now has 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, we agree with the staff's report about the effect of the September 18th motion. It was, as they call in the lawyer world, interlocutory, which means it was an interim step to bring back a policy which did not pass. So the policy that is in effect is the one that's in the staff report that approves friendly annexations, regardless of the effect on boundaries. And by friendly annexation, that means annexation with the consent of the property owner. With regard to some of the long-term costs, again, I just emphasize your comprehensive plan provides that the city will ultimately be responsible for those long-term costs. So the best plan for the city is to annex these territories as fast as you can. That gives you then a more tax base. It gives you the opportunity to maybe do local improvement districts and assess costs to the budding property owners. It's a cost that you will face, and Clackamas County certainly is not going to improve all those roads to city standards before they get annexed. That's one certainty. As I noted in my testimony, once it becomes part of the city, it does become your maintenance responsibility, but it goes into the mix of everything else in the city as part of your capital improvement plan, and you decide whether to proceed with improvements on that based upon need and based upon available funding. So it is a cost that you will face sooner or later. And as I mentioned in my materials, delaying addressing those costs generally does not make them cheaper. With regard to the testimony on impacts, as I noted above, I completely understand where Ms. Russ is coming from in terms of her concerns about costs, but approval of this annexation is not going to have that effect for the reasons I previously testified. And in conclusion, I would just say my client has demonstrated compliance with all of the applicable criteria, and we would urge the City Council to approve the annexation based upon the findings in the staff report. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Powell, is there anything else we are supposed to do at this point? You're muted. Mr. Powell, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, as this is the initial evidentiary hearing, at this point, before you close the public hearing, I will announce that any party who testified before the council tonight may request an opportunity to present additional evidence. And if they so request, either the public hearing will be continued to a date certain not less than 7 days after tonight, or the record will remain open for at least 7 days to enable the party to submit additional written evidence or testimony. At this point, is there any request to hold the record open to submit additional evidence or testimony? And giving a chance for anyone to unmute and request that. I don't see that happening, Mayor. So it would be appropriate to close the public hearing at this point.
All right, the public hearing then is closed.
And then before deliberation, because again, it's the initial public or evidentiary hearing, unless waived by the applicant, the council will allow the applicant at least 7 days after the record's closed to all other parties to submit final written arguments in support of the application. It will be considered part of the record, but will not include any new evidence. So does the applicant want to avail themselves of that or waive that?
The applicant waives the right to submit additional rebuttal.
All right. Mayor, we'd be ready for council deliberation at this point.
Well, we have to have a motion first.
That's fine.
Is anyone making a motion on this?
So we need a motion to approve the application?
To at least have discussion, yes.
I'd like to make a motion to at least have the discussion.
Well, I think the motion has to be to approve the annexation.
Make a motion to approve the annexation.
All right, is there a second? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Powell.
To clarify the motion, of course, that would be to tentatively approve ordinance 2852 and direct staff to present the final ordinance with findings on November 17th. Is that acceptable, Councilor Wynn?
That's acceptable.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. Councilor Mans. You better unmute it first. There you go.
Okay, there we go. During the time period that has been discussed rather ad nauseum, the September through December 2018 period, there was a lot of discussion around cherry stem annexations. We let the item drop, if you will, because if I'll recall, we had decided that we were going to pursue the Southwood group annexation, if you will. Try that as an experiment. We knew that there was a lot of pushback amongst individuals, although Southwood at the onset was very amenable to looking at annexation. The vote failed when it was brought to vote, meaning that there were many mixed emotions apart from the financial considerations about whether citizens in that part of the city wanted to annex in. With cherry stem annexations, I believe, although maybe not reflected in the minutes and other conversations, which would be sort of hearsay because it's not legally reflected in the minutes, there was much talk about allowing status quo, which was allowing cherry stem annexations as we had been doing. I don't think there was any determination that we were or were not, as pointed out by folks who have spoken on that subject. As far as the CIP goes, and I bring this up simply because it was a part of this overall conversation, it was made clear to everyone that there would not be a bumping up of through the list on the CIP if in fact folks were annexed into the city, that if there were roads to be repaired or other infrastructure items, they would join the CIP and be ranked as any other project. So I find some of the arguments toward this worry about immediate capital improvements needed to be done to be incorrect based on our previous conversations. To Mr. Conduit's point, it is incumbent upon the council, probably not this council, but the incoming future council, whoever they may be, to determine cherry stem annexations in that we don't fall into having this discussion once again. I don't know if my recollection is similar to others who were on council at that point in time, but again, I feel that we left off with cherry stem annexations being not desirable, but at the very least acceptable.
Yes, that's my recollection as well. And I think, unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Espy, we've had a couple of cherry stem annexations between December of 2018 and the present time.
Although not as large as this one, we've had some smaller ones. Yes, that's correct.
Councilor Wendell, you had something you wanted to say.
I just have a question of Attorney Powell. I've heard from two very intelligent, brilliant attorneys this evening that had conflicting opinions. One stated that there was a vote and that everybody voted against cherry stem. They named them by name, but it actually isn't an ordinance. So I'm confused as to what is the policy of Lake Oswego. We allow cherry picking, or not cherry picking. Well, you can pick cherries, but you can't do cherry stemming, or you can do cherry stem annexations. Is that correct?
Yes, I would read it that way as well, because the motion was made to disallow cherry stems. And then before the vote, and as Mr. Kohlhoff points out, the statement of the city manager following was after the motion, but it was before the vote, in which he clarified before the council that we're taking this as preliminary direction and to come back with a detailed policy relating to this and the other issues. No one on council contradicted that or said otherwise, and the vote was then taken. So as staff reads that, the vote was intended consistent with the city manager's statement. Then another reason for believing that is that, again, what was presented about cherry stems would not simply disallow, but to have certain exceptions for, multiple lots, other such things, and those would not have been encompassed in just a blanket no cherry stem votes. That the council did want to see a comprehensive policy that embodied exceptions and details and such. And when it came back, it was not voted in. And then following, as the mayor pointed out with Mr. Espy, council has allowed cherry stem annexations on a couple of occasions since. So all that together is a pretty strong indication that the motion, the staff was not out of bounds in any event. In taking that September motion as preliminary direction to come back with a policy, which was never adopted. So right now, there's no prohibition on cherry stems, and council staff, as I understand it, is processing it with the same sort of approach as they have all along, the lesson until they hear something different from the council.
But it is true that the council voted 7-0 to pursue a policy to take cherry stemming out of annexation.
Councilor Wendland, it wasn't just taking cherry stemming on, it was getting groups of housing together to make it a larger annexation if one was done. So it was around the whole issue of annexation.
Right, but specifically, I'm just trying to get the facts clear in my head, because I wasn't, Councilor Wen and I, we're still the rookies, so we were not here in 2018, and so I just want to make sure that I understand the history, because I do know that we've done some cherry stem annexations since then, and I'm assuming that we were not out of code or ordinance at that point, but there was a direction from the council to maybe in a wider approach, but
to re-examine our policy.
Well, no, was it to re-examine the policy, or that they were not in favor of cherry stem?
Re-examine policy.
Yeah,
that's correct. This is to the city attorney Powell. I don't talk to politicians on this one. Okay.
Are you referring to me as a politician?
Well, I wouldn't have to go that far, but I do want to say, I just want to clear it from Mr. Powell, Attorney Powell. He keeps us all sane and honest. So
but just don't go throwing around insults.
No,
you said bureaucrats, so.
So you're asking me, was there a unanimous vote by the council to pursue some sort of prohibition or on cherry stems? The answer is yes. I mean, the council had consensus at that time to do something about cherry stems. But again, it was clear that staff was to bring back a policy about it, and council couldn't reach a decision on it. It gave no further direction. So we were where we began.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think that's clear for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think, of course, like Councilor Wendland, we're the rookies on council, but I do remember early on at some of our first goal setting sessions we had at that was back at the golf center, but there was this discussion about cherry stem annexation and such, and so it was brought up, but we discussed it, but I don't think we didn't come to a policy, we didn't come to find a resolution on that. So we had two opportunities to do that. That was in 2019, and then at a goal setting in 2020. And as such, I think that you know, I know that I was looking back at some old emails that that we got, but it sounded like even though the prior council didn't approve a specific policy, I did note that one of the counselors did say that they would bring it up at the next with the new council, which I think was attempted, but we still don't have a new policy. So I think that what we'll find out is I think that, you know, our position hasn't changed. I don't think that we've had a chance for 2 years to come up with a different policy with regards to Cherry Stems. We haven't done that. So I agree with staff that they have to work with what they have. So I think there's been ample chance to, if it was an issue that was important to all of us, that we would have done it that way already.
Okay. Further discussion? Yes, Councilor O'Neill.
You got to go back a little bit further. The purpose and the conversation that created Cherry Stems was also based on a counselor's position that we should, and I don't want to use the word force annexation, but there was a counselor who felt he had momentum to get large neighborhoods behind annexation. And with that said, when it came up to Cherry Stems and we did not have a real strong policy one way or the other of what we should do, because we had always had a policy that we allowed anyone who wanted to come in. It was not forced. If you wanted to come into the city, then we were happy to bring you in. But that had some consequences, which was Cherry Stems. So when we told staff to go and bring back some data to us, it then went to the vote, should we have Cherry Stems or not? And we voted that down, that we were more interested to stay on what at that time was allowing anyone who wanted to come into the city without any restrictions. And that's what really came.
Friendly annexations.
So,
right.
That's kind of the history of where that whole thing went.
Further discussion? Okay, we've got a motion made and seconded. Madam Recorder, will you call the roll?
Mayor Studebaker,
Yes.
Councilor O'Neill,
Yes.
Nguyen,
Yes.
Wendland,
Unmute.
Yes.
and Councilor Mans.
Yes.
Your motion passes 5-0.
Can you call Councilor Kohlhoff and Councilor Lamont back in so we can get finished?
Okay, Councilor Lamont and Councilor Kohlhoff will rejoin your meeting.
Okay, I don't see Councilor Kohlhoff. There she is. Welcome back. Next item of business is information from council. Does anybody have any information they want to pass on to Councilor Wendland?
I think people, just to update people on a couple things. One, we are in, we're getting closer to agreement on an IGA with the school district on the pool and rec center. And I think everyone should be very excited and happy that we're very agreeable, other than for a few technical points, I think, and which are above our pay grade, but they're right in Mr. Powell's and City Manager Bennett's pay grade, that they're going to work out some additional details, but that is moving forward, and hopefully we will have an IGA to present in concept to the school board and the city council to kind of get generally the points. I would say it's reflective of exactly what the council had instructed us to do. and also the school board instructed their staff to do. So I think it's Lake Oswego working together, serving the taxpayers of our wonderful city. And so I think we should be very positive on that. And anyway, so good things are coming, and not as fast as we want, but you know, we have progress. So we're getting closer, and you have to understand we're dealing with two of Lake Oswego's slowest bureaucracies. So we'll get there. We will get there. So
Anybody else? Yes, Councilor O'Neill.
I'd just like to thank our two mayor candidates that are here with us. Nicely run campaigns. Good luck tonight. Like to also pass that out to all the counselors that ran. I think everyone ran nice campaigns, and you know, campaigning is probably one of the toughest part of this whole job. Especially asking people for money that are your friends and family. But good job, everybody.
You're right. We're blessed to have wonderful candidates. So thank you. Any other information from council? Any reports from officers?
I think we probably ought to just do a quick report. The three cities, Tualatin, West Lynn, and Lake Oswego, had a meeting about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago to talk about the various cities' intentions related to Stafford. And Councillor Wendland and Mayor Studebaker were there with me, so they can chime in. Actually, so was Scott Siegel, who has conveniently left the room. I would say what we suspected the mindset of the three cities would be in, it was pretty much borne out by the meeting. Tualatin is ready to begin planning for the area and would like the support of the other two cities. And West Lynn thinks it will happen slightly after hell freezes over. And so there is obviously a significant disagreement among the three cities about the pace of proceeding. There was a lot of discussion about tolling of I-205 and also funding for I-205 expansion. And then all three cities recognize that there's significant turnover in their elected bodies that's coming in January of 2021, and they agreed to meet again in December to talk about how that turnover might affect the desire to move forward. So that's sort of what happened. So we'll have another meeting in next month.
You should know that along those lines, Tualatin wants to go, its area of interest to Stafford Road. West Lynn wants to have its interest go to Stafford Road, which would leave us nothing. And we're clear that we don't want them to go, either one of them to go quite that far.
Well, I think all three cities want Wonker's Corner. So it was really a fascinating conversation, but I don't think that we're going to make much progress in 2020. Scott, would you have anything to add? Other than I think the planning directors were all sitting in this meeting just kind of, I don't know what they were doing, checking their.
We were all looking at Wonker's Corner.
I thought maybe you were checking your football picks or something like that. No, I'm kidding.
Councilor Brown, do you have something else?
I will say that we had full agreement that no one is really in approval or supporting the tolling. They think that's a bad decision unless you put tolling everywhere in the metro area. Don't just pick on 205. And so that we had unanimous agreement on.
Yeah.
So we walked away from the meeting feeling at least we had a little bit of agreement on something.
It's very collegial. It was clear that Tualatin views this area as the place that they need to go, that they feel that they're out of land for housing, and that if they want to add any additional residents to their community, this is where they need to go.
Maybe they shouldn't be building so many industrial sites.
I have a feeling it's the fact that they have regionally significant employment land in their community that's causing them to do that. But that could be my past life calling.
Anything further? Okay, we're adjourned. Everybody have a nice evening. Good luck to the candidates.
Thank you. Likewise.
Good luck, John. Good luck, Teresa.
Good night, John. Good night, Teresa. Good luck.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.